Prismatic Evolutions is legal, Budew is changing the game, and we have a pretty fresh meta to look at for the top 10 decks of February 2025. Today's ranking will be based on my own opinion, but my opinion is educated, so I wanted to show some of the resources that I was looking at while making today's top 10 rankings. The first resource here is the top 16 standings from the Osaka Champions League, which happened in December, but this was Japan playing in exactly the same format that we are going to be playing in now for February and March. Archaludon Dialga V-Star had a pretty breakout performance at this event, and all of the decks that you see on this top 16 I will be including in my top 10 today, except for one, and remember, this is opinion based. Next we have the Late Night, which is an online event. This was held on January 29th with 266 players, and Dragapult decks kind of dominated this event. We also see a good bit of Gardevoir in there, some Lugia, but notably no Charizard without Dragapult, and also no Raging Bolt and no Regidrago V-Star. If you are a fan of Charizard and Raging Bolt, I will definitely say don't be too worried, because I think those decks come back into the metagame in a big way with post-rotation, rotation happening in March and April. So if you don't see your favorite deck here, don't get too worried. They'll probably be fine after rotation. And then here, the Late Night, again, a different Late Night online event held on January 29th, this one with 265 players, and Miraidon was able to win this one with Archaludon Dialga V-Star in second, and then, again, domination from Dragapult decks and Gardevoir decks with some Lugia also splashed in there. The last resource I want to look at before we get into our top 10 is this tier list and data that was organized by Joe from Omnipoke. This was an organization of the Play Limitless events that have happened in Prismatic Evolutions format from January 18th to 30th, including 31 online events. And here we see that Joe has ranked Dragapult, Lugia, and Gardevoir into the very top tier based on these online events data alone. So as I said, and I'll say it one more time, my ranking today will be opinion based, so please leave your own thoughts in the comments down below, and let's get into it with number 10, Budew, Klawf, Terapagos. I think this deck has potential, and I'm putting it as number 10 today because it has a lot going for it, and it can also get really cheeky wins. The Pecharunt, of course, can get those turn 1 donks even when you're going first. And then going second, you have a lot of options. You can attack with Klawf, you can do the Pecharunt thing, or you can go with Budew. And Budew works with this archetype so well because you can swing with Itchy Pollen for 10, even Itchy Pollen for 50 with a Binding Mochi on, and then with the extra poison from Radiant Hisuian Sneasler, your opponent's poison will take 3 damage counters between turns, so you can item lock them while doing 50 damage, and then they take 30 more between turns. So if that's on like a Charmander, or a Charcadet, or a Dreepy, you're going to hit them and then they get knocked out in between turns with poison. That means they won't be able to use things like Pheasantipede EXs, Flip the Script, or Unfair Stamp because your poison damage is knocking them out in between turns. So that's pretty cool, but you're also getting that item lock, and then you also have big one-hit knockout potential with Klawf and Terapagos. The bad thing about this deck is it seems to have a pretty poor matchup into Dragapult Dusknoir and also into Archaludon, and that's why I'm ranking it so low on today's list. Also because it's combo reliant, it can be a little bit of a messy deck where you end up with a board of all of these support Pokemon, but like you missed what you were looking for by 1 card, and the deck just looks like a mess at that point. But it is strong, it does have potential, but I'm tapering expectations, putting it at number 10 on today's list. Number 9 is Gholdengo EX with Palkia V-Star. The reason I think Gholdengo EX has potential in this format is because there are a lot of Pokemon that don't want to get one-shotted. So Gholdengo EX's Make It Rain, of course, is very scalable. You can knock out pretty much anything with it. And that's bad for a deck like Archaludon that is relying on its high HP and tankiness. It's bad for a deck like Dragapult that's relying on its high HP, because a Dragapult, the value of it is that it's probably going to get to use Phantom Dive at least twice before it gets KO'd. But if you're just one-shotting Dragapults, you're going to outrace them in the prize trade. Palkia V-Star adds a very nice depth to the deck. Now you have a secondary attacker, but you can also use Star Portal to power up your Radiant Greninja and use Moonlight Shuriken to take a multi-knockout turn. I find that these decks, these more linear decks like Gholdengo, like Ceruledge, like Miraidon, they even out their linearness by having ways to take either multi-knockouts or take an extra prize. So the Gholdengo Palkia V-Star, of course, we can go into Shuriken and take 2 single prize KOs. Miraidon has Iron Hand so that it can take an extra knockout. Having ways to keep single prizers in check is very important for these decks that are trying to take big one-hit knockouts, because if you're just going to Gholdengo EX a single prizer 6 times, you're probably going to lose the prize trade. So that's kind of where Palkia and Greninja really come in handy. And of course, Greninja is also great draw support. There's also a Gholdengo Dragapult deck, and this is from the Champions League that we spoke about at the beginning of the video. It's more of a Dragapult Gholdengo deck, I guess. But I've played against this a few times on ladder, and at first I was very put off by the deck. It was a weird combination of Pokemon, but they work pretty well together. The Dracloaks and the Gholdengos both have drawing abilities, so you're going to have a consistent deck, or at least you're going to get to see a lot of cards each turn if you establish your stage 1s. And Gholdengo, like we were talking about, can take really good one-shot knockouts, and then Dragapult EX can come in and clean up the game from there. So I also like the inclusion of Monkey Dory, because you're running a bunch of energies to discard with Gholdengo anyway, and then you're running the 2 energy types for Dragapult. So the 2 dark energy for Monkey Dory is actually really clutch, especially against an opposing Dragapult deck. They're going to spread damage, not knowing you play Monkey Dory, then you drop the Dory, and that can help you get an extra knockout with Phantom Dive. Number 8, we've got the Charizard Pidgeot list from Champions League Osaka, and Charizard Pidgeot is definitely taking a massive hit in this format. It's all the way down to number 8 in my ranking, of course, and Budew is the main reason for this, but also the new Regigigas that is namely in the Lugia deck right now, but the Regigigas can also be a threat to Charizard. But Budew nerfs this deck because Charizard Pidgeot's strength comes from, on turn 2, I'm going to Candy into Pidgeot, Quick Search, Candy into Charizard, and now I have like the 2 strongest stage 2s on my board on turn 2, high HP, huge damage output, Dusclops and Dusknoir for supplemental damage, and for prize card manipulation. But if your opponent swings with Budew and item locks you, you can't really do that. So that's why this list is playing the Grand Tree Ace spec. Grand Tree, almost sort of a spiritual reprint of the old Stadium Broken Time Space. This will let you search your deck for a Charmeleon and then evolve up, and search your deck for a Charizard and evolve up. The problem is that when you do this and evolve into Charizard from the deck, you don't activate Infernal Rain. You can also, of course, use the Grand Tree for Pidgeotto, Pidgeot. That's why this deck's playing a 2-2-2 line of the Pidgeotto, Pidgeot as well. Of course, I do wonder, isn't it just better to play TM Evo maybe instead of this? But of course, if you TM Evo a Pidgey into Pidgeotto, you still have to find the Pidgeot EX, and that could be a problem if Budew is item locking you. So Charizard Pidgeot, very, very internally strong deck, very good stats, very good effects, a strong deck across the board. But when you put it into perspective that your opponent, a lot of opponents will be using Budew's item lock attack turn 1 going second, that puts things into perspective, and then Charizard drops down to number 8. Next, we've got Ancient Box. Ancient Box placed second at the Champions League Osaka, and I am featuring that second place list here. You'll see Monkey Dory making an appearance again when Dragapult's one of the best decks, or the best deck. It's great to have Monkey Dory in here. Of course, that Adrenabrain ability moves up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon, so long as you have Dark Energy on Monkey Dory. So that could be the difference between a knockout with Vengeance Fletching. Have you ever hit a Dragapult for 290 or 300 or 310? Well, the Monkey Dory's Adrenabrain can help you get there and get that one hit knockout. Ancient Box is good because it's all single prizers for the most part. You just got that Pecharunt EX in there as a tech for Retreat Lock, so you can never get Retreat Locked essentially. But it's a single prize deck that can hit for very high amounts of damage, and it can also pivot into a milling strategy with the Great Tusk. So if your opponent has gone through too much of their deck, you could just start going for Land Collapse every turn and mill 12, 16, 20 cards, whatever it's going to take. If you see that as a win condition, Great Tusk can definitely get there. That's why these lists play for Roaring Moon, because that's going to be your main attacker. And if you don't need to use Land Collapse, just dump the Great Tusk into the discard and it boosts your Vengeance Fletching. But if you do see that opening to go for the win condition of milling your opponent, Great Tusk has, you got 4 Great Tusks here, so you can do that very easily. I should also note that Ancient Box isn't that affected by Budew. This deck does play a lot of items, but you could just attach twice, knock out the Budew, and your opponent is only swinging at single prizers. The problem with, in a lot of matchups with Budew is you don't want to power up your 2 prize Pokemon just to swing into the Budew, and then your opponent gets to hit your 2 prizer first. That doesn't occur in this matchup. Now, your opponent still does get the advantage of attacking into your attacker, but all of your attackers are single prize here, so it matters less. Next at number 6, we've got Regidrago V-Star, which has been revered as the best deck in the format since August, I guess. It's not anymore, it looks like. Budew, the Budew format, the Budew meta is definitely shifting some things around, and this list of Regidrago V-Star even has its own Budew, replacing where Cleffa would usually be. Is Budew just better than Cleffa now in this deck to slow your opponent down? It could be good in the mirror match. It could be good against decks that want to rare candy their Dusknoirs or rare candy Pidgeot. So Budew could even become a standard inclusion in Regidrago V-Star, which is a deck that fears Budew. In terms of how to play matchups now with Regidrago V-Star, I think Regidrago V-Star is going to be picking to go second a lot of the times, because if you're playing against a Budew deck, you want to go second so that you can use Squawkabilly, you can use a research, and hopefully through that card draw, you'll find your energy switches, your earthen vessels, and your nest balls, be able to set up your board before your opponent uses Itchy Pollen. But that's not always going to be the case, because of course these Budew decks are often going to be choosing to go second, so when you lose the coin flip, you're going to get item locked. So it's going to be a struggle. You're going to have to try to power up your stuff ahead of time, burn through your deck looking for the energy switches turn 1 going first to get a couple of energies onto Regidrago V. And now this list is playing a switch, but I do suggest that Regidrago V-Star should probably play Latias EX instead of switch. That way you have a free retreat option on all of your basic Pokemon when your opponent item locks you. But I also will warn that Latias EX can be bad against any retreat locking strategies. So against a control deck or against a stall deck, if they bring up your, let's say, a Regidrago V on the bench with no energy on it, and they use Mawile or they use Water Ogre Pond Sob to say this Pokemon can't retreat next turn, Latias EX does not help you with that, whereas Switch does. Of course, you have Prime Catcher. You can Legacy V-Star for the Prime Catcher back, but that's only 2 outs to getting out of Retreat Lock. So just a note there. I do think Regidrago V-Star, similar to Charizard Pidgeot, is still a very intrinsically strong deck, but the metagame that is developing around it, the Lugia, the Archaludon, the Budew decks, it's just not very nice to Regidrago V-Star right now, but this is a very strong deck, which is why I still have it at number 6. Number 5 is Miraidon. Miraidon is coming back in a big way. It's looking like a good chunk of the top of the metagame in this format is going to be favorable, maybe slightly favorable, even matchups for Miraidon. It has a great matchup spread right now. The Magneton that it got in Surging Sparks was a big boost. The Latias EX was also a big boost. Pikachu EX as our Area 0 activator is also great. This is a deck list that Gabriel Fernandez won one of those online events with, the second one where we saw Miraidon in first and Archaludon in second. And I think this is going to be potentially the premier turbo deck of this format. So definitely be on the lookout for Miraidon. If you were an enjoyer of it in the past, you might want to switch to it again. It's looking pretty good. Even though Budew locks your items, you just try to set everything up on turn 1 and then amp the Budew. And from there, you just take 2-2-2. Just try to take 2 prizes every turn. Same plan as most turbo decks, but this one's just looking the best positioned in the current meta. Number 4, we've got Archaludon EX. With that Assemble Alloy ability, this Pokemon basically just sets itself up, and then Dialga V-Star has the ridiculous Star Chrono attack that lets you take an extra turn, and it does 220 damage. This is a very cool deck, very fun deck to play with all the Tauros and Scoop Up Cyclones and whatnot. You also got Relicant's Memory Dive that lets you copy Duraludon's Raging Hammer attack, which is great. So if you get hit and you're not choosing to Tauro or Scoop Up Cyclone it up, or you just can't, and you have the Relicant, you can copy Raging Hammer to do 80 plus 10 more for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So that's a way that you'll be getting your big one-hit knockout sometimes with this deck. Other than that, you're going to boss and chase things like Pheasantipede, Luminion, unevolved V Pokemon, and you're usually going to be able to knock those out with the Metal Defender attack, trying to just take your prize as fast as possible, denying prizes from your opponent with high HP and with healing. And also you have that V-Star power that can get you an extra turn to come back into the prize trade if you are losing. So yeah, Archaludon I think is going to be a big contender in this format. I have it ranked at number 4. Out of the top decks, its worst matchup is probably Lugia, because Lugia typically has either Cinccino or Weirdeer V that can one-shot Archaludon. And Archaludon EX's biggest weakness is going to be Pokemon that can knock it out in just one hit. But other than that, looks pretty good for Archaludon. It's a bit of a simple deck, but it's actually really fun to play, and I think it's going to perform really well in this meta. Next is Lugia. I don't want to spend too much time on Lugia. It's a boring deck. We've seen it for a long time. It's finally going to rotate out soon. This is a Japanese list from the Osaka Champions League, so if you see this list, that Minccino there, I don't believe we have that in English right now, so you'll just replace that with one of the 70 HP ones we do have. But we do need to look at the Regigigas with Jewel Breaker. It does 330 damage when it's swinging into a Terra Pokemon. So notably, you won't want to attach Double Turbo to that, because then it'll only do 310. But the 330 is going to knock out Charizard in one hit, and it's going to knock out Dragapult EX in one hit. And the Cinccino and the Weirdeer, those are your big one-hit potential KOs on basically anything else. Legacy Energy is great, not only because it provides energy for Iron Hands, but because it's going to make your Pokemon worth one less prize card if knocked out by damage. Make sure you're watching that. It has to be knocked out specifically by damage, not by damage counters or any other sort of effect. But yeah, Lugia is probably going to be somewhat unharmed by the Budew meta. That's why we see it succeeding so far. That's why I already have it up at number 3. Budew can hurt it, don't get me wrong, but if Lugia is able to get the Archeopses into the discard on turn 1 and then just hold a Research in their hand or something, they'll probably be fine turn 2 and just set up like a normal Lugia would. Number 2 on this list is Gardevoir EX. One of my all-time favorite decks of the Scarlet and Violet era so far. And it's still up in the air if Budew is going to be a mainstay in this archetype. This is a bit of a more intricate version of Gardevoir, I'd say, using the secret box, using rare candy, using the Budew and the Spirit Tomb. If you look on the online events, you'll see a lot of different Gardevoir lists. This was just the highest placing from one of the online events. Awesome deck. Gardevoir has a lot of options right now. The Cresselia is a good tech against Dragapult decks. Moonglow Reverse, heal your board. Having extra Tauros scenarios in your deck is also good against Dragapult. Just picking up damage off the board, swing with Gardevoir, take a hit, pick up your Gardevoir, turns it into a bit of a tank and pick up, and then tank and pick up kind of deck like Archaludon can be. The Budew, it's going to be interesting to see players decide when Budew is getting used, which matchups it's getting used in. This deck does play rare candy, so you can hypothetically go turn 1 Budew, then Candy Guardy and start attacking. Decks that don't play candy, it's a little more awkward because you Budew, but then next turn you just evolve up into your Curlias, and then you Budew again and just hope that the opponent is stalled out long enough for you to manually evolve up through all of your stuff. So I've been kind of in the boat of wanting to keep 2 TM evolutions in my deck, no Budew, and just go TM Evo Curlias. But there are definitely arguments for playing the Budew as well. The Spirit Tomb can help against a bunch of stuff. It can help against Lugia because they're relying on Lumineon. It can help against sometimes Archaludon likes to use Lumineon. Helps against Snorlax, Stall, and Pidgeot control because they're using Rotoms. I guess it also helps against Dragapult because Dragapult's using Rotom and Lumineon. So the Spirit Tomb might be a hot tech if a lot of decks are relying on Rotom and or Lumineon. And finally, the number 1 deck is going to be Dragapult Dusknoir with Budew. The lists vary for this one as well. I chose one of the higher performing lists. Dragapult EX's Phantom Dive puts a very efficient amount of damage onto the board. Dusclops and Dusknoir add that damage. Radiant Alakazam can move it around with Painful Spoons. But the Budew is really a big deal because you go turn 1 Budew going second, and then on your next turn you can like Lance for triple Dracloak, Recon Directive 3 times, get your Duskulls down, Budew again, and then next turn you start wreaking havoc with Phantom Dive and Curse Blast and Painful Spoon, spreading damage everywhere, trying to set up multiple knockouts to finish out the game. So this is a very scary deck. It has self KOs to manipulate prizes. It has draw power built into its evolution line. It has item lock. It has damage spread. It can move damage in the middle of the turn. It has Crispin for energy acceleration, Sparkling Crystal, so it needs less energy to attack. This deck is a powerhouse. It's a bit complicated to play perfectly, but try it out. I think you'll have a lot of fun, and you're also probably going to win a lot of games once you get the hang of it, and winning games is fun too. So Dragapult EX Dusknoir, this is likely the face of the meta for a month or two, but maybe things will change. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And if you're interested in learning even more about the Pokemon trading card game, go check out my Substack. I write free articles over there, free to subscribe to, and I will either be writing or have already written by the time you see this video, a video about how to take in online event results and Japanese event results and some of my thoughts about the meta and decks. So be sure to go subscribe to that over there. And you can also check out my Metafy page if you're interested in one-on-one coaching or my masterclass to the competitive Pokemon TCG, which includes skills such as sequencing, decision-making, deck selection, metagaming. I teach you everything you'll ever need to know about being a competitive Pokemon TCG player in that guide with free updates forever. So check that stuff out if you're looking to get better at the game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.